Good morning. My name is Dr. Manjunath, Welfare Commissioner, Government of Karnataka. I am going to present my research paper on aligning and coding sexual harassment laws in India, the role of the state missionary. My presentation is divided into three parts. The first part would deal with the role of the state missionary and instrumentalities of the state. The second part would deal with a simple sample survey which I conducted about the impact and implementation of this act in this country in all the states of India. And lastly, I have also made a small survey among the stakeholders to understand their perspectives about this act and the implementation of this act. First, the role of the state missionary. India passed the legislation in 2013 on the prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplace, prevention, prohibition and redressal. The Act envisages authorities under the Act to implement this Act and take up the grievance mechanisms of the women who raises the complaints against the perpetrator. The most important state missionary is the central government, the Government of India, who is also a very big, very huge employer. Next is the state government. The state governments, we have 29 states in India. The state government is also authorized to take up action against the sexual harassment at workplace. We have two institutional mechanisms under the Act. The first being the internal complaints mechanism, internal complaints, which is to be set up by all the private sector, and local committees which has to be set up at the district level by the government missionary. The Act covers the entire world of work, and most of the workplaces, both in the formal and informal sector, are covered under the Act. The Act also covers domestic workers. The Act has a huge impact in all the workplaces, and all the workers are covered under the provisions of this Act. Local Complaints Committee. This is a very important institutional mechanism to be set up by the district officer in all the districts of India. The district officer shall exercise powers or discharge functions under this Act. He or she has to be nominated by the appropriate government. The statutory duty of the district officer is to constitute Local Complaints Committee. This is a constitutional and institutional mechanism to hear the grievances of sexual harassment at workplaces. The local committee is authorized to receive complaints of sexual harassment from establishments where internal committee is not constituted, or where internal committee cannot be constituted because they have less than 10 employees, or if the complaint is against the employer himself. So that means local committee has a very powerful role to play in redressal of the grievances of sexual harassment cases. Further, the district officer shall designate in every block, in every talukas, in every rural and tribal areas, in every ward and municipalities, in each and every workplaces, a nodal officer. The duty of the nodal officer is to receive complaints in his jurisdiction and forward the same to the local committee to within 7 days, so that the local committee will start hearing the case and try to give justice to the aggrieved women. The district officer shall also has to nominate a chairperson who shall be an eminent woman, who is a non-official member, and there are 5 members in the local committee, 1 member amongst women in every block taluka, and 2 members and 1 from a NGO or a civil society organization, and an officer from the government. In total, there are about 5 members, 3 shall be women. This is the composition of the local committee who shall hear the cases of sexual harassment at workplace. Financial support to enforce the Act. The central government, through its budgetary allocation, has to sanction amount or sanction grants to all the state governments, and it is the duty of the state governments to provide grants to the local agency, and the local agency will give funds to the district administration, and district administration shall utilize those funds to enforce the Act. This is a sample survey which I conducted in India. India has 732 districts, out of which the sample we took was 387. We personally made calls to all the district officers in this country, out of which 207 did not give any response, and 146 districts in this country in our sample survey told that they have constituted local committees, and very few told that LCC does not exist and committee is yet to be formed, and they are not aware of the act. So if you could see the data, almost 207 did not give any response, and 146 people told, 146 districts confirmed that they have local committee. This is the district-wise data of the local committees, all India level. We have provided all the districts with having local committees, and those districts which don't have, and those districts which did not respond to our call. So the percentage of local committees in India is around 35% in our sample survey, and there are so many districts in this country where local committees is yet to be constituted, and most of the districts, some of the districts are not even aware of the existence of this act, and no nodal officers is yet to be, nodal officers have not been so far nominated. The graph depicts crimes against women in India from 2015 to 18, of which sexual harassment is also shown. Sexual assault is the largest crime in India. This is the data from the National Crime Records Bureau. It's an all India level data. We also have data for Karnataka, where sexual harassment and sexual assault are the two important crimes, very major crimes, which are shown in the data. What are the functions of local committees? Once local committees are constituted in the district, the local committee shall receive complaints from the nodal officers, and then the local committee shall hear the cases in accordance with law. They shall follow the due process of law, principles of natural justice in giving justice to women. If a complainant is a domestic worker, the duty of the local committee is to examine the prima facie case and forward the complaint to the nearest police station, and the police would hear the cases of sexual harassment of domestic help. The law places more importance on the service rules and the service laws which are in existence. So it entails that, and it also gives powers of the code of local committees are vested with powers of the Code of Civil Procedure. Duties and powers of the district officer. The district officer shall monitor the timely submission of reports furnished by the local committee, take such measures as may be necessary for engaging NGOs for creation of awareness of sexual harassment, and local committee has to prepare an annual report and submit it to the district officer. So the duties of the district officer in enforcement of this act is very, very important. The role of the appropriate government. The government shall monitor the implementation of this act and maintain data on the number of cases filed and disposed of. In fact, we don't have the data as to the number of sexual harassments that are reported to the government, both in the government and the public sector and the private sector. So the role of the state becomes more important, and it is the duty of the government to implement the act, but we have found that the state is not coming forward to implement the act in its totality or in black and white. They have the role of the state is to advance the understanding of the public of the provisions of this act, providing for protection of sexual harassment of women at the workplace. Further, the state, the appropriate government can authorize any officer to make inspection of the records of the workplace in relation to sexual harassment, who shall submit a report to the government. However, penalty is not envisaged in the act against the district officer who is not constituting local committee. This is an important drawback. This is a drawback where the act doesn't penalize the government officers for not constituting local committees. In fact, one of the member of parliament in Rajya Sabha, Shri Binoy Vishwam, raised a question in the parliament asking the government as to how many complaints the internal committee has received, what action they have initiated against those complaints, whether women have received justice in this regard. So this question was raised in the Parliament of India, and the reply given by the government is that there were about 750 complaints, out of which 227 complaints are from the various central governments, central ministry. So further, the Ministry of Women and Child has developed a platform, online platform mechanism called She Box to receive the complaints of sexual harassment at workplace. At this juncture, I would like to draw the attention of the Convention 190, Violence and Sexual Harassment Convention, which ILO has passed during 2019. Some of the provisions in the conventions are very important so that the national law in this country can also adopt those definitions, because the Act in India 2013 doesn't define violence, it only defines about sexual harassment. So I think certain of the provisions like enforcement mechanism and then the inspectorate, effective inspections, or some of the provisions which are not there in the national law, this could be given effect by the Government of India by trying to understand the provisions contained in the Convention 190. Lastly, a small survey was conducted where online survey was sent to 100 professionals in India, out of which 52 responded to the survey. 35 were women and 16 were men and one other. Very interesting outcome was there from this survey, out of which 40% of women replied that they agree that the POSH Act 2013 is effectively implemented in their organization. However, more men strongly agreed about its effective implementation. Only 40% of women replied in favor of the Act, saying that it was not implemented effectively. Further, women did not repose much faith on criminal justice system, that is filing a case with the police for sexual harassment, but men differed a bit on this. About 80% of women and 90% of men believed that social norms shape their awareness and understanding about sexual harassment. More women believed that government should intervene in handling sexual harassment, and lesser men believed so. Almost 80% of women and men believed that there are certain gaps in the POSH Act for its effective implementation. Almost 80% of women believed that they faced more problems after raising a complaint, and men slightly differed on this issue and they disagreed on this. 50% of women believed that employers consider the Act as an hindrance to employ them, and men slightly differed on this issue. They disagreed on this. More women didn't believe that their companies considered sexual harassment training seriously, and men differed on this issue also, and they slightly believe that their company has taken training seriously. Only 31% of women said that the training on sexual harassment brought in change in behavior of men and women at workplace, and again men differed, believing that it was largely successful. 60% of both women and men believed that Me Too movement created awareness among them to some extent. 80% of women and men agreed that sexual harassment laws should be codified and made simple yet effective. 60% of women believed that laws relating to women adversely affects their participation in labor markets, and 50% of men believed so. 90% of both women and men believed that a long-term global perspective is essential to seek solutions to combat gender-based violence at workplace. To conclude, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act 2013 has failed in its impact, and the number of violence against women at workplaces day by day is on a very high rise. So it is a high time that the state government takes up the role of trying to implement the act in its earnest thing, and then I think the state government should not become a passive spectator on this issue. Both government and the private sector shall enforce this act so that women work in an environment which is free from violence and harassment at workplace. Thank you.